What is it that is activating me in the moment? And you're right. I think a lot of people don't know, or they do know, and they're pushing through, right?
Yep.
And so the more we
Right.
override our internal cues, the more we're just really patterning our body to stay activated.
Yeah.
And then we sometimes get to a point where we think, I guess I'm just not made for this work. I guess I can't do this work. I'm not cut out. When really the opposite is
Right.
true.
Welcome to Pulling Threads. Today, I'm very excited to introduce my guest, Rosanne Carter, who works with infants, children, parents, other therapists, and many other professionals. And the center of her work is a nervous system, so near and dear to my own heart. Welcome to Pulling Threads, Rosanne. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. It's kind of
Yeah.
fun to be able to talk about the work and all of that. Yeah.
Well, I want to start off letting you kind of share what you do because you work with so many different people who support children and families in addition to children and families. So, can you just tell me what it is that you do and how you support people and teach them about their nervous system?
Yes, I'd love to. So, like you said, I work with children and families. And the age, I mean, my title and the work that is that's at the center of my work is infant early childhood mental health therapist. And people are often like, babies? You work with babies? And yeah, baby health. And baby's mental health is really deeply connected to the parent's mental health. So that's why we call it infant early childhood mental health. And so the way that I do that work is really supporting parents' well-being, supporting their mental health. Because what we know about parents and caregivers and their connection to their babies and children is that young children absorb adult nervous systems, right? And so
Yeah.
and that work in itself is either parent child in the room together or maybe just parents by themselves. And sometimes it's children and then we invite parents in at the end. So there's no
Mm.
roadmap really for how that body of work looks. And the work I do with professionals, really, we're not machines, right? We're all divine human beings with nervous systems that respond and react and absorb and hold and feel the work we do with children and
Yeah.
families. And so that work, the hat that I wear for that is reflective practice consultant. And really, that's either getting in the room with one other person, two, three, a group of people, and we are doing the work of reflective practice. We are reflecting on the work we do. We're reflecting on the ways that we show up. For some people, it might sound like clinical consultation, where they
Mhm.
might kind of present a family or a kiddo, a child they're working with, and then they start reflecting on, I'm feeling stuck. Or I get really, my chest gets tight when I see that maybe a parent didn't follow through, or they didn't try the things I'm suggesting. And I
Yeah.
keep coming back and they keep saying, I tried that and nothing works. Right? So we have our own feelings about that. Our nervous systems are internal storytellers of how we move through the world. So of course we have feelings about that. Of course we have our own biases. Of course we have our
Yeah.
own values and alignment, things that align or don't align with us. And we're in the room with other people that are different. And so noticing and making space for tapping into what's coming up for you is
Mhm.
so deeply important so that you can keep doing the work.
I love that. And I think you're so right. We aren't robots, no matter what our profession. So, whether you're a guardian ad litem or a lawyer or a therapist helping a family through some type of system or in therapy, whatever you're doing, we are still human. And I think that people often forget that. So, I love that you're doing that kind of work. Honestly, I didn't know that was something, I didn't know that was a thing. You mentioned just before we got on the call that you sometimes work with lawyers. And since I do have so many listeners who are either have navigated the divorce system or are going through it, or are planning on going through it. Do you work with attorneys or guardian ad litems ever in those types of situations?
So I currently have a contract where I am supporting attorneys who are working with families in the child welfare system.
Okay.
And so the way that that reflective practice looks is it's on Zoom and is really supporting people with their big feelings in the same way that we support other people with big feelings, right? Is supporting their nervous system, their responses. And when we make space for being human and for being able to show up, we hopefully the work is minimizing burnout, right? Because we
Right.
know that the cure to burnout is not self-care, it's community care, right? And
Mm,
so when we are in community with others, we can support the weight that we carry and sometimes noticing the patterns that show up, noticing that, my chest often feels tight when I walk into the courtroom, right? But even just peeling back the layers a little bit, and sometimes there's an aha. So it's not about fixing, it's about being with and creating space for those like aha moments
yeah,
where, oh, so then we start thinking about, well, what can I do to support my body before I go into the court?
I love that. I think because I have my own divorce story and my own parents' divorce story. So it's such a deep part of who I am. That story is a big part of who I am, regardless of how much anyone tried to not make that true. It just is. So now I support women, specifically women, considering going through or just after. And you're absolutely right. It's impossible for me to never have a nervous system response to the stories I'm hearing and the people that I'm supporting. It's impossible.
It is.
Yeah. And so I'm thankfully really aware and embodied. So when I get a feeling in my chest, I know what that means, but I suspect many people don't, even therapists. I immediately know if something a client says is triggering me immediately. And I know my tools to start calming my system in that moment so that I can continue to support them and I don't lose my frontal lobe. But that is so important. And I feel like I guarantee there are so many therapists who could use this reflective work that you do because I think, well, when I first started working, I didn't necessarily know. And I would meet with my supervisor during my supervisory period. And she was like, okay, like this work you're choosing is very personal for you. So we're going to have to put tools in place. Is that something you do with people? Is like almost prepare them? Yeah, that's very cool.
And it's not a one size fits all either. Very personal, and it's understanding your own internal map, if you will.
Mm,
What is it that is activating me in the moment? And you're right. I think a lot of people don't know, or they do know, and they're pushing through, right?
yep,
And so the more
right.
we override our internal cues, the more we're just really patterning our body to stay activated. And then we sometimes get to a point where we think, I guess I'm just not made for this work. I guess I can't do this work. I'm not cut out. When really the opposite is
Right,
true. We're not meant to be
right.
robots, like you said, in this work.
No.
We should have feeling.
We and our clients want us to have feeling too. And
Yeah.
you're right, there's no one size fits all because I had a conversation with a client this morning where this client needs downtime alone, 100% alone, and not all the time, but we're working on him understanding when he's reaching his window of tolerance and then knowing how to step back and communicate to the people around him, this is not personal. I need my time and my space. And then the next step is teaching him in a more preparatory way. Like, let's not get to the reach your max capacity. Let's plan those alone times because that's when you refuel. But his is different than anyone else, right? Like what he needs doesn't look like what anyone else needs. So your work is very almost like customizing a system for each and every person.
And helping them understand their own, right, their own cues and what
Yeah.
be coming up. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, really important. And I think even in my work, I give lots of nervous system guides and things. I have a school community and I put guides in there to help people and pre-trial guides. But in general, I can tell people if you become triggered in the courtroom, there's a good chance your frontal lobes are going to shut down and it's going to make it a lot harder for you. So these are some tools that work for some people. One of these might work for you. You need an in courtroom system to calm, whether it's for me, it's I always put my hand on my chest when I feel things starting to light up. But we have to figure that out for each and every person. So when I'm giving tools like that to a community, I've got to get them 10 options and say, try all of these and see which one works for you before you're in the courtroom.
I mean,
And
it's
we
just about
hope,
to say that, yes, before, because I think a lot of
yeah,
us tend to try things in the moment when we really need it, but we don't remember
yes.
what those are, and we don't remember because our frontal lobe is starting
Right.
to.
Once your frontal lobe goes, your amygdala takes over. It's not good. I had
So
a really wonderful therapist. She's a hypnotherapist that was part of my healing journey. And she reiterated over and over again that the meditations she sent me and the daily practices that she recommended, I needed to do them when I was in a good place 5 times a day. So the hand on chest, which works beautifully for me, needs to be a habit. The minute my chest feels tight, my hand goes to my chest. But I had to do it 100 times every day, 4 times a day for days to get it to the point where when I was actually triggered and I really needed it, that it was just habit. And it's so hard to get people to follow through with that. It took probably 3 sessions of her saying, "Are you doing it 4 times a day?" And I was like, Not really." And then finally I was like, "Oh, she's right." Because I needed it in a moment and it wasn't habit yet. And I was like, "What was it she said I needed to do?" Now I get it. Like, okay, it's important to use these tools when we're in a good place. So they just become our go to.
absolutely, and I say that all the time to the people I work with, is use it when you don't need it. And it sounds counterintuitive, but you're right, because when our frontal lobe goes, the last thing we remember is the thing that our therapist told us to do. And I link it to like building muscle memory, right? Like when you
Yeah.
don't need it, you're building this muscle memory so that when you do need it, right away our predicting brains go to, oh, I know it feels good. And you immediately you do that thing. But the reason, what I often tell my clients, when you're using these tools, when you don't need it, what you're doing is you're adding safety to your body, right? Because
Yes.
that's what that is. That's what is a cue that our body interprets as I'm okay, I'm safe, I'm here, right?
Yep.
Whether it's hand on your chest or breath work or whatever it may be, you're adding cues
Yes.
of safety. And that really is how we stay in our window of tolerance, right? So our window of tolerance is the place where we are connected, curious, and compassionate, where we have access to those three things. When we're activated, we move further and further away from our window, which makes it really tricky to stay connected, curious, and compassionate, which is why this work is so important to me, especially the reflective practice work. If we're activated or we're in burnout or we're shut down or we're anywhere but our window, then it's really hard to stay connected to our clients, really hard to stay curious with our clients, and it's really hard to have compassion for our clients. I also work with a lot of teachers as well, so this applies in the classroom and in
Oh,
childcare.
that's great.
right? Because when you're burnt out or when you're activated by the noise and, you know, the chaos,
Or
we,
something that's happened that morning at home
yeah,
even.
all of that, right? It's going to be really hard to stay connected to the kiddo in front of you who's got lots of big feelings, lots of big behaviors. You're not going to be curious and you're not going to be connected. And oftentimes, what happens is the lens we approach them with becomes more behavioral. Go sit outside. You've lost your recess. Really, what's happened is we've lost our capacity to stay connected. And I mean, we all need
Most
connection.
likely those kiddos are some of them are coming already in fight or flight or something like freeze. We don't know. I think of the kids who come to school in freeze and just look like they don't care. But in reality, we don't know what they saw that morning or last night or a week ago that put them in a dysregulated state. So there are a couple of things just because I never know if I have new listeners. I talk about the nervous system a lot. There are two things I want to kind of back up on. First being co-regulation. So when you're talking to these professionals or even parents, can you talk people through the importance of co-regulation and what it is, and maybe even if you yourself aren't regulated, how that might impact someone you're working with?
Yeah, yeah. Co-regulation, I'm a very visual person. I kind of see it as an adult, parent, caregiver, professional. We're allowing the person, the human in front of us to borrow our calm,
Mm,
to borrow a regulation so that they can stay in or get close to the window of tolerance. So co-regulation really is about being present, being with another human with their feelings, their big behaviors, all of it. And I kind of see it as just getting in the hole with them. You're kind of getting in it with them and you're not fixing. I think that's where a lot of parents I work with might mix those up, like I'm co-regulating, but really what they want to do is fix it. They want to make it go away. They want to make it stop or make the yelling stop.
right,
And which is such a human response, right? Because we're getting
right.
activated. We're getting
Yep.
so activated. And co-regulating is not that. Co-regulating really is about showing up with your body and being present with another human.
The beautiful thing is, all you have to do is be there and be calm and be regulated, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. People think they have to fix when in reality, if we just stay regulated, we stay calm, it's going to have a calming effect.
Mhm.
And, but it is hard. It's challenging. I had an episode with my son 2 nights ago. He had a class trip away for 3 days and he wouldn't pack. And I had had a really long day. I was exhausted. I'm sure this is like the classic story of parents. I worked 12 hours. I walked in thinking he'd be packed. He wasn't. He gave me a little attitude. And mid sentence, I caught myself and was like, you are not making anything better right now. In fact, you're throwing him off and he was fine. But, my window of tolerance was so small because I wanted to just go to bed. I wanted to come home, find that he was ready to go the next day, and go to bed. So I couldn't be regulated until I realized I was like, oh, just take a breath, right?
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to go take a shower and I'm going to come back and talk to you in a few minutes. But I was raising my voice, which I don't do that much. I used to before I learned mindfulness and went through therapy and got divorced. But
Yeah.
all I had to do when I came back out was calmly say, what's going on? Why haven't you packed yet? He didn't want to go, right? He didn't want to go. So it was that simple. So he didn't want to go. Has a lot of anxiety about this long bus ride and this trip and getting in trouble because the other boys are going to be 12-year-olds. And he just needed to say, I really don't want to go. well, you still have to go, but let's talk about what you need to pack. Like, and just take it back down to, right? But I've learned a shower, water is good for me.
Mhm.
Shower, being alone, stepping away from the day's worth of work. So it's
Yeah,
that whole idea of like putting the oxygen mask on ourselves first.
such a beautiful example of when a window was razor thin, so narrow, you lose
Yeah.
your capacity to stay connected and curious, right?
Yeah.
Where in that moment, it was really hard to say, what's going on? Right? You were completely outside of your window until you were able to recognize, like, oh, this is not helping. I'm co escalating. I'm not co regulating. I'm going to go and shower. And then you came back, your window grew. You had capacity to be curious and
Yeah.
connected and have some compassion.
Right.
And so it's through that framework that makes it in for the record, not my framework, The Window of Tolerance by Dr. Dan Siegel. But that framework can be so helpful as you recognize when you no longer are connected or curious or compassionate and what happened when you're
Yeah.
outside of that window. Because you can't be two places at the same time. You can't be
Right.
activated in fight or flight or even shut down
Yep.
and curious and connected. It's impossible, nearly
Yeah.
impossible, to be in both places at the same time.
Yes. And I think that that example, I like my own example because we think about complex trauma or trauma, those types of things happening when big things happen. Like I said earlier, divorce for me was a big event. But we can say things and do things and lack compassion and curiosity and make space for our kids on a day to day basis because life is just hard, right? Every parent in the world is pretty much like overworked, underpaid, burnt out, all these things, right? Like this is a day to day thing that we kind of have to keep in check to protect our kids because in that situation, he'll be okay. But he did need to say to me, and he needed to feel like I cared that he didn't want to go, right? Otherwise, you're my mom. You're the person who's supposed to care. So I'm sure there's no long-term trauma there, but those little moments, I like it in the Gottman world. They talk about like those little moments when you're given the opportunity to show up and you either lean in or you turn away or you lean out. Those are the kind of things I think when your window of tolerance is has shrunk and it's almost there's nothing, there's no tolerance left. We don't lean in to our kids when we need to, or our clients, or the parent if you're counseling parents. And so understanding where you're at, I think of it almost like a gauge. Where am I at right now? I
Yes.
love I think polyvagal theory uses like the red, orange, yellow, green coding system. And my boyfriend and I sometimes use that. We don't use those exact words, but we talk about things in terms of our capacity all the time. Do I have the capacity right now to have this difficult conversation or figure this out? If we do that with our kids and we teach that to our kids, it's pretty powerful.
So powerful. And many of us weren't taught that.
No, it should be. I think that it could be something that we're teaching people in school, right? We have school counselors. These are lessons to help people, number one, listen to their body and understand that big emotions are stored in our body. So when we feel something weird, a weird sensation, pay attention to it. But also, it's okay to say to somebody, I don't have the capacity to have this conversation with you right now. I don't have the capacity to do my homework right now. I need this. The world would be such a different place if we had taught people how to
Right.
recognize when they need a timeout or to stare at the wall or meditate or whatever it is.
Right. And instead, we teach the opposite, which is don't listen to what you need.
Just that.
Even from a young age, it's not intentional, but sometimes kids fall down and like, you're fine. Just keep
Yeah.
going. Oh, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that hurt a little bit. And
Right. One thing that I would love to talk about with you is there are a lot of words out in the world now, nervous system type of words that I guess it's trendy to say, or he triggered me, or because I'm in the divorce and breakup world, there's a lot of that in all of the social media spaces. That was triggering. I use the word too. And when I say it, my body is literally having a sensation and I'm lighting up from something, or I know I can feel myself shutting down or going into fight. Can you talk about what that means and why we feel it in our body? And just just talk about that. I'm sure you see it in people, and I guess I'm curious if you educate people on that as well.
yeah, so I use activate versus triggers. I try to minimize my violent, I guess, language, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, I use the word activate, and the way that I frame it for kids, adult humans, we talk a lot about how our body feels things before we can name them, right? So oftentimes when we react, that example that you shared when you're yelling, you're not in the moment thinking, now I'm going to yell because I am so upset and tired, and it just happens. And because we feel something first before we can name it. Now, in hindsight, I'm sure now you say, well, yeah, I was tired. I worked 12 hours. I was hungry. I didn't eat dinner. The list goes on. But
Right.
we feel before we can name. And the same is so true. The same is true for all of us, especially kids who don't yet have maybe the full awareness of why they're reacting the way they react. And so, sorry, your question was, so how do I teach that? That kind of I got excited and then
I think activate is a good word, and I think people can say the word triggered when they mean something just upset them or something just, oh, that was so triggering because it's become a trendy word, right? So I guess I wanted to communicate the difference too between when someone just does something that you don't want them to do versus something that activates your nervous system. Is there a difference?
yeah, that's a good question. So I'm thinking back to a parent that I just had a session with where he come back every week and he's like, I got triggered again. He'll use that word. And he's like, it just bothers me when my tween just said no or doesn't want to listen. It just really, I can't even stay calm. I just get really activated. I yell, and then I have consequences, and I've taken away his friend time, and I've taken away our mountain biking time. I've done X, Y, Z. And um, so, and then he said, do you think he's doing this on purpose? Because that's what I think. I think he's doing it on purpose. He's making me mad on purpose. And so, just even that example of kind of peeling back the layers and me in my window being really curious and wondering, what is it about the not listening that's really tricky for you? And there's a whole story with that. A whole story about, wow, fears that my kid is gonna not respect adults in life. I don't want him to end up like me. Lots and lots of different stories that
Fear,
come,
disrespect, not being important, all of those things.
all of those things.
Yeah.
And having a space to realize how much is so attached to
Yeah.
us, to the trigger or the activation.
Mhm.
Or versus initially at the beginning of our work, he's like, why don't you get mad like everybody else? Wouldn't you get mad? Right? Yes. And there's a story. There's a story there. Let's figure out what that is. And so I think with everybody, there's a story. I mean, even if we're yelling because someone else is yelling, there's still a story there. I think there's always a nervous system story connected
Mhm.
to
Yep.
when we respond and when we react, not feeling heard, not feeling seen.
Yep.
Kids
Feeling
too,
unimportant because you're not being heard or seen.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we all have a human need to feel connected and to feel,
Mhm.
and even in home and family where it's a parent-child relationship, sometimes we unknowingly or do things that contribute to our kiddos not feeling like they belong.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That example you gave really hits home because I've the tween, and I don't know if you've come across this. I think you're in Washington. It's coming from the internet, so it could be there too. I'm sure it's everywhere, but there's this term that kids use right now called rage bait.
Yes.
And it is mine has used it against me. Used it in an attempt to it is on purpose. I'm not sure why, but it paralyzes you, and it is we could probably do a whole episode on rage bait. So, it is a tactical weapon that I don't know if it's generational or what, but I've even heard from people in our school that the boys are using it against teachers now. It stuns you. It's the weirdest thing. They say whatever it is. It feels like gaslighting, and there's a technique, and it's not. I'm only sharing that because my friends who have children his age are experiencing it too, and I'm like, what is this? So, are you hearing the term rage bait, and are you hearing from parents this, what I feel? Because I'm a therapist, and it literally stuns my whole system. It shuts me down. I'm like, I don't know what to do. And I've learned to just stay quiet. Otherwise, it does cause a reactivity. There's really
Yeah.
nothing to do.
The term is very familiar. To me, I have a tween too. I have a 12 and a 15-year-old. Although I will say I have not seen it in my practice yet. And even you talking about it makes my chest tighten a little.
My chest is tight talking about this is not where I anticipated going in this conversation, but now I'm like, I need to know from someone else. Even professionals at their school are like, what do we do? What are we supposed to do with this in the middle
Yeah.
of class? Because I don't know, do you think it's new? Is this a new, are they learning it from the YouTube? Where does it come from? Because my 15-year-old daughter doesn't do it. And they actually do it to each other too. So my son has it done to him. And so he kind of just recently tested me with it. And then almost within 24 hours, one of his friends did it to him and it really upset him. And he had just done it to me. And I said, wow, that sounds exactly like what happened the other night when we were trying to talk about this situation and you did X, Y, and Z. Is this the same thing? And he was like, yes. So he was kind of something that's being done to him. He was testing it on me to see. And it certainly did disorient me. So then I, of course, sent a message to his therapist and I was like, can you try to get him to connect the dots here? He didn't like how it felt. He tested it. I'd like it to not keep happening because it's such a disorienting thing. And thankfully, because of being a therapist, I believe my kids will always be in therapy and she was able to help. But what is your take on this?
Goodness. Well, nice. I'm going to back up a little bit because I wonder if this might be helpful. I think it's important. Something I talk to parents a lot about is knowing the difference between top down behavior and bottom up behavior, right?
Okay.
So, bottom up would be more our nervous system response, where
Mhm.
we're reacting, and there's a story about that, and we're not able to name in the moment, but it's kind of this is an immediate a response that we have,
Yeah.
right? Whether that's fight, flight, shutting down is a nervous system response. Top down feels very intentional. So that's where I would say rage bait lives.
Okay.
Whereas you're using your frontal lobe to do whatever it is you're doing, to rage bait, I guess. You're
Yeah.
very intentional. You know what you're going to say. You're clear about who you're talking to, how you're going to say it, the words you're going to use. Maybe there's some intention around topic that you're going to talk about, knowing that it'll upset the person, that all
Yeah.
feels very top down.
Hmm.
So I'm wondering that I have with a lot of parents is, can you tell the difference between top down and bottom up? Because
Yeah.
they feel like different parental responses really in those moments.
Right. What
Yeah.
is a parental response to top down? And I want to say it feels like manipulation. And I don't know if that's fair to put that on a 12-year-old, but that's what it feels like.
Yeah. I think about boundaries, right? And I
Mhm.
think that's tricky for a lot of people. We don't really talk about boundaries a lot, but even as a parent, having some really clear boundaries on what's okay, what's not okay is tricky. And, in that age, 12 is, 12 is so hard, right? And they're still pushing limits. And
And
so,
exploring what works and what doesn't work. And they're certainly witnessing things and then saying, oh, I'm going to test that out. And of course, it's going to get tested on your parent.
right,
It's the all, identity formation is coming. Like there's so much playing, right? What works, what doesn't work? It's working for him. Is that going to work for me? And yeah, I would say I did put a boundary in place and I said, we're not going to do that here. That doesn't feel good. We're not doing that in our house, period. But I feel like it's probably happening to people and they just don't know. It was very disorienting for me. And I feel pretty prepared for something like that. And I was like, what just happened?
wow.
So,
In the moment, do you know exactly what it was? Or did it take you knew exactly if the top down rage bait, or did it take a little bit to kind of go, what was? Because I think, and that
well,
makes it really confusing for a lot of people. If
oh, I think it's very confusing. It was
right,
confusing for me for a minute. I literally stopped and it was, we were having a family meeting about something that happened between my two kids. And rather than participate, he did this rage bait thing and just it was like he was drawing a line. I'm going to do this. I'm not taking ownership. I'm not taking responsibility. I'm not participating in the conversation that you're having. I'm just going to do this to you and stop my participate, like draw a line. And
right,
so for me, because we do family meetings really well, I was taken aback. And I looked at my daughter who, because rage bait has become so rage baiting, whatever you want to call it, so common, she
mhm,
knew what was happening.
okay,
And I just looked at her because I was dumbfounded, like, and she goes, Jack, don't rage bait mom. And I said, then I was like, oh, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it felt like to have it happen. And then talking to someone at the school who supports staff, they were saying, oh, yeah, it's happening to the teachers in the classroom. And we're
mhm,
having to go in and teach them how to respond because it's had the same effect on them. They're like, what just happened? So, no, I didn't know. I didn't know what happened until my daughter said that. And then I was like, oh gosh, I guess I need, he has said, such and such rage baits me and such rage baits people. And I interpreted it almost like bullying, but I didn't know the exact delivery mechanism until he did it to me. And so then I had a whole different view of it. I was like, oh, this is not what I thought it was. This is different than bullying, although it's probably a technique used by bullies, right? Like
yeah, yeah.
you said, you have kids, like you're familiar with it. Have you heard it happening to, or have you witnessed it, or you just kind of know in general about it?
In general, we've had conversations in our house about, is it happening to you? And I mean, both my kids have said no, but people do it. And then getting curious, right? So I think that
Yeah.
when you're in your window and you're able to be curious, because that's an activating topic. And I could easily sway to be like, well, why would people do that? Like, that's so, you can get, I mean, even in the tone, and they didn't even do anything, I can still be activated. And
Yeah.
so there's a story with that too, right? And
Right.
so just even noticing. So I use the hand on my chest a lot when I'm noticing. And so I'll say,
Yeah.
whether it's with my kids or even with people that I'm working with, I do this and say, ooh, my body's feeling that. That feels like a lot. I'm gonna take a
That's
minute.
really good. I put
And
my hand on my chest, but I don't announce why. So I think that's really good because you're modeling it then.
and that, yes, I can hold your stuff and I feel it. It feels like a lot right now. And oftentimes in the moment I'll naming it and then I'll say, I'm gonna take a breath. Do you want to join me? Which
Yeah.
is always an invitation, not an obligation. And they always do. Because I need to know in my body, I need to feel that safety again, but I'm responsible for that, not the
Yeah.
person that I'm with, right?
Yeah. Well, that was very helpful. I guarantee there are so many parents out there dealing with it and not even knowing or being able to name it or understand, oh, we're going to have to put some special boundaries in place with this new strategy that they're using. Because I have two older children. I have a 28-year-old too, and I've never experienced anything like this. Again, it's really only happened the one time, but it was like, this is powerful. So I can't imagine being a teacher and having that happen
Having
already.
20 other kids in the room.
Right. And so then you become a spectacle almost because if it throws you off and you don't know how to respond. So, well, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, and I had a whole list of questions for you that I haven't gotten to because this conversation has been so good. But you talk about the nervous system as narrator, and I think this is one of my favorite topics, and I think it's so, so, so important. So I want to be able to get to it. Tell me what you mean by internal storyteller first.
Sure, you're familiar with The Body Keeps the Score. Basically, with people that haven't read the book, it really just talking about how our body hold trauma, our body hold memories, our body stores all the things that happen to us, right? I think of our bodies as like any little thing that happens is like little imprints that it leaves in our body, and so whether we remember them or not, and I think that piece is important. Whether we remember the events that happened, our bodies remembers, and so we react sometimes to certain tones, certain scenarios that sometimes we don't even know why. And so our internal storyteller really is about being able to get curious with ourselves, right? Not just with other people, but to connect and get curious with ourselves and wonder what's happening for me in this moment. Not what's wrong with me, but what's
Yeah.
happening for me in this moment. And then there's that self compassion piece. So I really use those three words a lot: connection,
Yeah.
curiosity, because it's important that we do it with ourselves. Because so many of us move through life and we don't get curious. We don't ask ourselves. That's the way I am. Hmm,
Yeah.
tell me
Yeah.
more.
I love that. Go ahead. Well, I wanted to also talk about something that you mentioned in your questions that I asked before I had you on about sacred rage. So you mentioned experiencing sacred rage for the first time, and I don't know what sacred rage is. So tell me about that and tell me how
Yeah.
it's been important in your life.
Well, I don't even know if that is a real term or not, but it's a
But
feeling
that's you term.
that I experienced recently. So I grew up with an emotionally immature parent. And really only in the last couple years have really been able to name that and see
Hmm.
the impact of that and have everything make sense. And so I recently had an experience with that parent. And, she said a few colorful choice words and used them towards me. And I don't know, I mean, maybe that's what rage bait feels like. I don't know, but it felt, I would stand, I was so hurt and so angry that it just came pouring out of me, not towards her, but in myself. So angry. How dare you? How dare you say that? How you've never a whole story that I could share maybe in another podcast. But and I had realized that I wasn't just angry, but that I was feeling rage. And I had never felt that feeling before. And it felt like anger with no place to land over and
Yeah.
over and over again. And in that way, it felt pretty sacred to be able to name that. I've
Yeah.
never ever been able to tell her how hurtful her parenting has been, right? And in that moment, setting boundaries felt so clear. So, like, clear, it was clear day. And for the first time, was able to say, "You don't get to talk to me that way." And I haven't touched her since.
Um,
And that felt sacred.
Right. So there was probably literally lifetime of anger that had just been stored.
With no place to land as a
Right.
young
Right.
child, right? And just being and learning that belonging and love is contingent on compliance and behavior, right? And
Mm.
so,
Yep.
and a nervous system response, there's this other response that's called fawn, right? People
Yeah.
call it I mean, people tend to use the word people pleasing, but I think it's a little bit deeper than that. It's
Hmm.
not just pleasing others so that you make them feel good. It's really, to me, it's more about learning that is how you're loved and that's how you belong
Safe.
and safe.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of considered like the fourth fight, 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 flight, freeze, or fawn. So instead of doing the first three that we always talk about, fawning is a way to keep your nervous system feeling safe by people
Right.
pleasing. And it's so it you don't feel like you have a choice, right? In order to survive, I have to fawn, I have to people please, which is very different than just doing things for people because you
You want
feel
to
you
be
have to.
right. Or,
Right.
yeah. Yeah.
And the source is different, right? Because the training, if you will say, the feeling of safety that was necessary, the defense mechanism, the part that was formed, whatever you want to use, that came from childhood, from a parent or a close caregiver, your main caregiver, because in order to survive, you had to do things to please that person, right? Am I getting it all right?
And survival, there's so many ways we can look at survival, right? And here, not just physically survive, but survival as in feeling connected and loved and you belong.
Yes.
And we all have an innate need for that.
And the problem with people pleasing, because it sounds so, oh, like a martyr, but the real problem with people pleasing and fawning is that when we do it, we almost always self abandon. So the message is you have to do this to survive and to be safe, but you don't matter. That's the message you end up sending yourself, which is, I feel, oftentimes creates all of these other addictions, all these other numbing things because there's so much confusion in our system. And the fawning may have been necessary. It may have been something we actually needed when we were 5. If we had a selfish or an erratic or an unsafe parent, we may have needed to do that when we were 5. But at 45, we no longer need it. And it's now self abandonment, which is damaging further. So you set a new boundary. You let out, it sounds like the sacred rage was a release. And the boundary wasn't just with her, it was with yourself too, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not doing this anymore.
I'm not doing this. It's not okay. It doesn't feel good.
Because, right? I matter. I love that story and it's beautiful. And I'm sorry that you had to go through it. But I think, well, tell me, like, what's it felt like since then?
So it's pretty new. So since January, which last month, there's peace, there's lightness, and there's confusion, right? There's definitely thoughts of, am I overreacting, right? Which is it me?
Oh, it's always, is it me? Right?
It's tricky because, our parents are getting older, and I certainly don't, if anything were to happen, I wouldn't want this to be the end of our relationship. You know what I mean? And
Right.
so,
Right.
some lots of conversations in my head about what it would look like to come back. See, immediately I want to say repair, but it's not. That's what I've had to do is repair, even though it wasn't mine to repair. But what it would look like to come back and be okay with not having repair, and
Yeah.
what does the relationship look like moving forward. It's a
Yeah.
lot,
Yeah. But you're
yeah.
well
But
equipped to go get curious and figure it all out. So,
and that's tricky. I think being a therapist, I know her story. It makes sense that she is the way she is, right?
mhm.
All of it makes sense. So
Yep.
there's compassion there.
Right. Right.
And right, so it's holding space for compassion and boundaries and all the pieces that make up a relationship, right? So
Yeah. I think there's a lot of balance to find and figure out when we are a fawner, right? Or a people pleaser because of our childhood. And we have a very high level of empathy because we're we're therapists, so we're probably going right. And we don't want it to be toxic empathy, toxic for us. And when we understand people's trauma, we understand the behaviors that hurt us. And it's really difficult to not allow or excuse and not set the boundaries. So that's the work, right? Like, okay, I have to set the boundaries that protect me. I have to work about not people pleasing or fawning. And at the same time, continue to have compassion for the other person who's hurt us. The compassion and the boundary balance is really challenging, I
yeah,
think, for most people.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, we are going to have to start wrapping up, but I really want to have another conversation. We didn't get to the safe and sound protocol. There's so many other things that I would love to talk about, and I just know that you have a wealth of knowledge to share with people. So I hope you will come back and join us again.
I would love to. I know conversations are so rich and juicy, which is why I love this podcast because it's so important to have conversations that you don't really get to have.
Yeah,
You
you are
know?
allowed to go so much deeper. I was just teaching my therapist that I'm training to do podcasts. I'm like, you're going to see that you can go so much deeper there than you can in a reel or a TikTok or any other way of sharing information with people. You can go as deep as you want. And it's really special. And I think as therapists, we have our own story, which is really valuable, how we got here, the way we use the tools, and it's almost like modeling it for someone else. We can share our own life journey and how we use the tools we've been trained to use, even the tools we use with other people in our own life. And by modeling that, I think it can be really powerful. So, thank you for sharing, especially the last story there that seems like it's really still very fresh. So,
Thanks for allowing me to
yeah.
share and all that. Good to be here.
Yeah. Before we sign off, is there any like one go-to technique that you teach people that you could teach in a minute or so of how to just get regulated or get grounded if something activates?
Oh, there's so many, but the first one that comes to mind in our ear, I typically start with my left, but in our ear, there's a Simba. The Simba kind of like that little pocket right here, right there. That Simba loves to be massaged because right
Oh,
behind it, the vagus nerve runs. 5 circles forward, right? And the pressure that you apply, it's on your own. You decide what feels good. And then maybe and a good starting point can be about 10 seconds, but I love this exercise, so I just kind of, do it for as long as it feels good. If you have long nails, it might feel tricky, so you can use like the tip of an eraser or a
mhm.
Q-tip or something else that'll allow you to massage that area. If you are a Q-tip user, this is why it feels really good because what you're doing is massaging the vagus nerve inside, right? That
Wow.
feeling. And so
It does
that,
feel good. I just did one side. I feel like I need to do the other side.
and if you start yawning while you're doing that, that's a positive sign. 'Cause what that means is your body's moving into rest and digest. And
Mhm.
I'm stifling my yawn, but it feels really good. So you can do that anywhere. It's a great place. You can do it in your car, in the classroom, the courtroom is a great little tool that you can use on your own and you're breathing. You're not holding your breath while you're doing that.
I
So,
love that. I've never heard of that one. So thank you. That's
you're welcome.
great. Something
You're
new. Well,
welcome.
thank you again, Roseanne, so much for being here. And I really hope you'll come back because I know we have more to talk about. So thank you. I'm going to have all of your contact information in the show notes for on all the platforms
Okay.
and in social media when I'm sharing this. So if anyone wants to reach out to Roseanne for her resources, you can find her, I think, Instagram, Facebook, and your website.
In LinkedIn, I'll
And
double check.
we'll put everything in the show notes. So,
Perfect. Thank you
all
so
right.
much. Thank
Thank
you.
you.